Yay, and we are live. Hello. Woohoo. So welcome. Welcome everybody to the show today. We are full of energy, which is surprising because I woke up about 1 o'clock this morning and never went back to sleep and went and meditated and did yoga. And I realized I've done too much exercise over the last few days because I'm very sore and got that. You know, when you feel like you've been run over by a truck?
I do. Yeah. I felt like that last week as well, Perry.
Yeah.
I had the bushfire coming through our open window last night. So I was up at 1 o'clock as well, trying to shut doors and, I felt like I was suffocating under it.
Yeah, I saw that. Anne-Marie's been telling me about it. Now we live in the same area.
We do. I was wondering whether you got that because, you know, with the breeze, it just brought it right into the houses.
Yeah, no, we haven't gotten that, but it's been all over the news, and Anne-Marie, being Anne-Marie's tracking that as well as tracking whales from she's out there with binoculars, and then she rushes me down to the beach. Okay, just go look at the whales. Anyway, we're going to get into today's subject, and I've got a special guest, and this special guest is a lovely lady called Belinda Bailey. And Belinda Bailey, well, she is a relationship expert, but she's way more than that. As I've told you, Lou, Belinda is someone that I really respect because I consider her my peer in my work, right? So as a people reader and a facilitator of people, I very rarely meet someone with my speed and accuracy or insight or knowledge. Belinda is certainly my equal in those areas. So I'm going to bring her in.
Skill too, Perry, like what you and Belinda both have. Like the world needs that skill right now more than ever to help guide people and show them where they're at. I think it's a great skill and so thoroughly respect it. So it's wonderful to share that with everybody.
Well, we're going to, and that's one of the things. And we'll just quickly, hey, Belinda, how are you?
Hi, guys. Thanks for that introduction, Perry. It's very humbling. Thank you.
Well, it's true, and it's quite fascinating that you've said that, Lou. I and Belinda, this is where we're going to start today, actually, because we're going to be talking about a particular pattern of hiding. But I want to set this up with a couple of different things, and you've actually really helped me access the first topic. So when you said that Belinda and I, with our skill sets, are really needed at this point in time, it's actually true. And I probably have just realized over the last month, I've really understood that. And here's why. So we're going to start with a bit of an interesting topic. And this topic, and just for the viewers and listeners, I tell Louise and I tell them nothing, right?
I don't know anything that's in it. I know, I'm just here.
I tell them the subject.
I'm out here.
I tell them the subject, but I do that for a good reason. I just want things fresh, and I don't want things.
That was half an hour ago, Perry. You told me that.
I know. But here's why, right? And this is where we'll start with this. Last week in the show, and we had Brandon on, and Brandon is a maths wizard, king of logic, property investor, property developer, multi-business owner, and I asked you and him what were your best decision-making states. And you both said, and you had your different words for it, higher consciousness states where there's no ego involved. So you're basically tapping in, and you said you wrote a book from that. Okay, Now, I went away from that fascinated. I knew you'd answer that way, and I thought Brendan would answer that way. Okay. Now, I'm preparing a course, and it's actually called the Red Pill Course. Do you remember The Matrix?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this is where Belinda's going to come into. She's going to get really excited now. Now, in preparing the Red Pill Course, which is, you know, people think they know reality. Okay. They think they know reality. You can already see Belinda's laughing. Yeah. Now, they think they know reality. And most of the ways they interpret reality are through logic and then what we call their conscious selves. Now, in preparing for the Red Pill Course, I've had to accept that most people do not know there are other states of consciousness that are far wiser are far better for making decisions than the one that they walk around in every day. And I'm just going to share this because this is a world that both Belinda and I know really, really well. And Lou, I also know you know well. Probably not as well as Belinda and I, because we work in it, right, day in, day out. And I'll just say this. So when I was a little kid, there was a couple of different ways my mind would tell me things. I had logic, and my logic's a good logic. Okay, you can't work with business people and develop business building IP without having good adherence to logic principles. But as a kid, I might be sitting with someone, and I would suddenly see all vines wrapping around me and strangling me. And when I would see that I couldn't trust that person. Okay, or I might look at someone else and I'd see sunflowers that would just flash into my mind. And so from an early age, I had this experience of being informed from more than one location within my consciousness. Now, I've extended on from that, and I can tell there's multiple levels of information that I get from different locations within my personal consciousness. Okay. Now, Belinda, you're right with me. You understand that, and you know that.
Yeah.
But how do you get on when you're telling other people about that, or do you even tell them about that?
Mostly not, to be perfectly honest. What I've found is that the best way to share information with people or to help people to grow themselves is to meet them where they're at. And you would have had this experience as well, Perry. You know, going to a regular Joe Blow who wants to, say, improve their business or, you know, improve their health or something they come to you for, or improve their relationships. Generally, if you sit down with them and say, hey, I know that you really want to work with that person, but they're strangling you with vines, they'd think that you're a loony and they'd go to the next person and miss out on a whole bunch of really great information. So what I tend to do instead is meet people where they're at, but with the information that I have. And because this kind of consciousness that we're talking about, this expanded consciousness, is actually our natural state. And the only reason we're not all operating in that way is because it's been trained out of us from children. So because it is people's natural state, when we speak to people, meet them where they're at, but let it be informed by greater information, and treat them as though they're intelligent beings and conscious beings, because innately they are, then they open up so quickly, don't you think? And they start to then be really open to things that are a bit more weird or strange. And it only takes a conversation or two before you can start to drop in maybe some more of the expanded consciousness things that we're experiencing or seeing, because already they're more open to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And with that as well, guys, like you both get symbols, like you get the symbols as well, Belinda, when you do it. Which way does it work for you? Because there's times that I can relate to actually sensing, like you're sitting down with two people, like you can actually sense where they should or shouldn't go. Basically, you can feel where it's not an energetic match.
Yeah.
So how do you get? So I know Perry gets symbols, which I love to hear what those symbols all mean one day, Perry. But Belinda, how does that come to you?
For me, it's a mix. It's all a real mix. And so I hear things sometimes, and I've seen things in the past. I see things less now, except for when I'm in my own kind of practice state. So if I sit down to do some clearing or some deep insight work, then I might get symbols then. But in my everyday life, I generally don't get symbols. I think what happens though is, you know, normally at first it's just a knowing, like you said, like a felt sense. And I think then if I don't listen to that, then there'll be another thing that will come, another way of speaking, perhaps a symbol or maybe an auditory experience. And if not that, I'll fall over and smack my head on the ground or something like that so that I pay attention.
Yeah, because I feel it come in, like I don't see the symbols, but if I'm actually having a one-on-one with someone, it's like my mind melds in with it, and I can literally, and I know you've talked about this before, Perry, I actually feel a complete rush of energy right from the right-hand side, and I see an impression, but it's for that person. I can't always do that for me, but I actually can for others. And I don't quite know how to explain that because I don't tell anybody that.
Yeah, so this is really interesting. So on the weekend on Sunday in this group here, I think it's about 30, 40 people joined, and I did an intuition training because I'm preparing for the Red Pill course, which is for rationalist business owners to introduce them to these other decision-making consciousnesses. That's part of it, as well as helping them see their blocks. But in that training, I communicated about 5 different ways that you get information from non-ordinary states. Now, in that, I also want to say this, just to clarify this, because Tim Ferriss has said, this is really interesting, that he does not know one billionaire in Silicon Valley that doesn't use LSD to solve their problems. Right now, I'm going to tell you right now, you don't need the LSD. And Belinda knows that. You can have it if you want.
I'm going to be dead if I had to run my business.
Right. They microdose. Now, what happens is, and Belinda's laughing because she knows, you don't need that. In fact, you're better off training yourself to do that at will. Now, people can take LSD if they want, right? If that's what they do. That's not what this is about. I prefer to be trained myself to enter these states of consciousness. Now, and so in that and we're going to move on because we're just starting with this, but I wanted just to show you something. So in that workshop, I said everyone has to work out how they receive higher consciousness information. Yeah. So Louise, when you do a one-on-one that you receive this information about the person. So your intuitive pathway. Now, Belinda's a master. So she's like me. We've done this for years. So we know when we're projecting, it probably doesn't even happen for us. Like I'll sometimes check about once every 3 months. I'm going, oh, is this me or is it the person? So sometimes if I've got a pattern going on that might be enmeshed with the client, a similar pattern to the client, then I'm going to go, oh, I got to check whether it's me and my projection versus pure intuitive insight. Now, by the way, and for anyone that's interested in this, because we are going to go into another subject, but you'll see why this is a perfect subject. Go and watch the intuition class that I ran on Sunday. So you just see it in the feed in the Evolve group, because one of the things that I do, and I'm a very good bridge for this, I'm a science nut, a neuroscience nut, a physicist nut. So I'm able to explain the latest brain science or the latest sciences in regards to this intuition versus the old metaphysical or spiritual models. So if you're a rationalist going, oh, there's no such thing as this, go watch it and come and do a one-on-one with me, right? Or go and do a one-on-one with Belinda if she's doing them now. I know she does all the relationship stuff, and you'll see. It's a fact. It just saves people so much time because you can't see your patterns. You're unconscious. Someone like Belinda and myself and Lou, when we're working with clients, we're helping our clients see what you can't see, but it's really holding you back. Okay. Yeah. Now, I want to share a story. And first of all, I would have never thought that Perry Mardon was hiding. Okay. I'm going to say that. Anyone that meets me would go, well, he doesn't hide. He's just out there, right? And I had, through the COVID period, through my reset process, because I'm doing, right? Now, Belinda gets this. I don't have a choice in it. I can facilitate my own reset process because I understand what happens when a person is transforming. By the way, transforming and evolution is an internal psychological revolution where a new set of thinking, a new set of behaviors replaces an old, less effective set of behaviors. So evolution, when you evolve, you become a far more effective person. There's nothing fluffy-wuffy about it. It's actually quite painful. It can be quite confronting because your ego is asked to address itself and let go of old patterns. And of course, Lou and I are putting together a course on that because it is the most perfect thing for this point in time after COVID. And I know I'm speaking lots. I'm rushing. I'm going to get to the core and I'm going to leave it to you girls for a bit. Okay, so I'll tell the story. So for years, I see people hiding, right? Hiding is, what does hiding mean? Okay. So hiding means, I'm not going to say that to Auntie May. she might be offended if I show that side of myself, right? You know, I've got a kink of wearing pink boots up to here and women's underpants and what have you. You know, I'm not telling my Auntie May that. No.
I didn't know that about you.
I might try. I might try that. But you get where I'm going. It's like that.
You can borrow.
I don't need. That's so good.
Don't know him, I said that.
That's so good. This is great doing this show. I'm just doing a show with people I love and I have friends that we can have a joke. You get what I'm saying? I don't tell my auntie, right? You just that you get and why? Well, it's just politeness. But what happens is you'll see that people are constantly hiding what they really think, what they really believe, and parts of them that they think will get them rejected. And I just want to deepen into this to set the context up. When I say people won't tell the truth about things, I'm not talking about the triggered truth. You know, someone says something, you get angry, so you say it. That's fairly dysfunctional. I'm talking about your most deepest authentic truths. And not sharing them with others and not sharing them to the world because you don't want to be rejected. Okay. And then you can say there's parts of you that you don't show the world because you think that you're going to be rejected for it. And so what happens is I realized years ago, this becomes a habit for people. They're hiding. Now, if you understand how hierarchical structures work, including parents, into governments, into other people in society, hierarchies are constantly shaming the people that they have power over to conform to the value structures of the hierarchy. Right? Now, you can see this happening in Australia at the moment. Okay, it's happening on a political level. So as an example, and this is not a political conversation, to get everyone to adhere to Australia's approach to COVID, which is to lock down and try and get rid of it, we must control what people think and say. So any dissenting viewpoints are quickly shamed and squashed. Okay. Now, there's a practical reason for that, just in the same way as if you've got if you're bringing up a 4-year-old and the 4-year-old's involved with certain behaviours, you're trying not to shame them for who they are, but you're trying to correct their behaviours. And typically they take on a certain amount of shame with that because they identify themselves with their behaviours. Now, bear with me. So I'll set this up and then when you guys can run with it. What happened for me, and I reckon Belinda will probably really relate to this, and I think everyone will relate to this. Everyone listening and watching will relate to this on some level. In my own reset process, going through COVID, I sort of was going, I just wasn't getting it. I just wasn't going, I'm so excited about what I'm doing. So excited. And I realized that what I did was I go and work with business people, and I and I enjoy doing that. And a lot of that works in logic. And a lot of those people don't fully understand or own just how much their patterns impact their business. Okay. And I touch them with it, but because they might come to me for business, they sort of unconsciously downplay their patterns. And so does this make sense to you both? I'm going, no, you need to get into your patterns, but they're a bit resistant to it because they came to, they know Perry's decent with how to build and scale out a business because of my IP. I was going, this isn't satisfying to me. It's just not satisfying to me not being able to win, and they're not getting the outcome that they would want. Okay. And then, I'd go and work with investors. So I do a lot of the investor conferencing stuff, and I'd go down there and I talk about patterns. And then the same thing, stuff I enjoy and I like patterns and I like doing business. But what I realized was I was compartmentalized. And what I mean by compartmentalized is when I'm with the investors, I can't say this in public. And when I'm with the business people, I can't say that in public. And then I might be off doing some other work, which is working deeply within a person's psychology or reading them or working on extremely deep levels with them around their patterns. Okay. And then I have this whole other aspect with the higher consciousness work, right? Which is in some forms is some form of a spiritual kind of work. And I looked at that, and I know I'm taking my time here, but I just really want to set this up. Suddenly I went, oh, that's interesting. So in each of those different compartments, I hide certain parts. And I started to go back in my memory, and I remember when I was young and first started doing this work, I would go and work in corporations, and people that knew me really well knew my skills, and they wanted me working in those corporations, and they wanted me working in those types of environments. But they always told me, you got to hide that. Don't tell people how you know what you know about them. So if I knew this much about someone, because I could read them, I would only tell them that, kind of like what Belinda said before, meet them where they were at. So I was set up from day one to hide elements of me. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now, then I realized something else. Because when you do inner work, contemplative inner work, your unconscious will reveal the patterns. Okay. And so I saw that and went, aha, so I have been hiding. Didn't realize it, just a habit. And I'll just set this up. And then I went back, okay, so when I was a younger person, I realized that no one could comprehend the symbols or the reading. People thought it was nuts, right? It was nuts. There was no, so again, I was sort of hiding that. Look at Belinda, she's kind of reading me at the moment. And kind of having to hide that. And then I'm going to share something else. There is a loneliness, and some of you may have experienced this. So as a result of my inner work, and inner work provides dividends, but you start to go beyond normal states of consciousness, meaning you no longer see the world in the same way that everyone else sees it. You now have an ability to separate your logic from your ego. So most people have confirmation bias, and I know that Belinda and I had huge conversations through COVID because we could see that people were playing around with what we call their confirmation biases, which is they're just stacking data and stacking information so they can be right. But if you've been a meditator and you're transcending your ego structure, it gets to the point where you don't care whether you're right or wrong. Yeah. Your sense of self is not based on the ego. You start living in the world very differently. So I realize again, fuck, I'm alone, right? Now I have friends, and of course I do. But so in that, two things. Perry, don't display your intellect. It just offends everyone, right? That's been a big thing in my life. Don't display your intellect. You're offending people, because if you start to develop your intellect and you are growing spiritually, your way of viewing the world is completely different to the normal person. So they're offended. They don't want to hear truth. They don't want to know truth. So I realized that in this, that there was a whole bunch of hiding going on. This is where I want to go. I'm going to hand over to you. Now, hiding means in some ways that I was still ashamed of aspects of myself. And I went, I'm over this. This is not, once I saw it, I went, bang, this is part of the reset revolution for me, Lou. And it's happened quickly for me. I went, I don't want to be compartmentalized. I want to be everything I can be. Who Perry is, I want to be that. And I don't care whether people like that, don't like that, whether they're confronted by me. It's just something. I just went, bang, I'm not living like that anymore. And instantly, you see, I made the action, boom, 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 boom. Yeah. But then I realized something, because I started to dig deeper into this. And then you'll see, I just want to set up a structure for the conversation. I realized, I went, okay, so if we're walking around with shame, and I sort of know this from working with people, if I've been hiding myself, I need to go and look at the beliefs associated with that. So hiding is always associated with feeling wrong. Yeah. Now, if you feel you're wrong, right? So think about it. We don't show someone this because we're slightly ashamed of it. We feel that we'll be rejected or it won't be accepted. So we're actually telling ourselves, oh, we're kind of wrong in this world. We're not right in this world. Okay. Now, if you're saying you're wrong, you're not right in this world, I'm not good enough, or whatever the story is about why you're not showing, what you're actually saying to consciousness or the universe is, I don't deserve. I don't deserve. Because shame, now this is an important subject because our consciousnesses create, our beliefs create, or our focus creates. So in hiding, we're saying something along the lines of, I'm not good enough, I shouldn't be seen, there's something something about me that might offend them, be offensive to them. So we're moving into that complex of, well, we're backing away from life, hiding. So you can't live in purpose if you're doing that, by the way. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
And second thing, you're saying no. Now, this is the last thing I'll say with this. So if you feel like you've got shame and you don't deserve, which is going to be part of hiding, what you'll do is you'll reduce the reception of receiving. So as an example, my wife over the last 2 years, I notice she receives my love now. If I tell her how beautiful she is, I see her get a real big smile and she sinks it in. So I know that on some level she's been healing her shame, because if you've got shame, when someone gives you just something like a smile or something, a compliment, you'll sort of go, push it away. Now, if you're pushing that away, you'll be pushing more things away, metaphorically and in reality. I'm handing over to you guys now.
Big setup there, Perry. Thanks for that. But
yeah.
can I just say one thing first off, is that I love you, Perry, and I'm so happy to hear that personal journey of yours. I haven't heard that whole piece. And the last time we were working together, we were working towards building a program for CEOs, and we had this other woman working with us who's very steeped in that arena, and she was a lot of the time saying, oh, well, you're not going to be able to say it this way, you're not going to be able to, and I'd just be sitting there thinking,
Yeah.
I'd be thinking, yeah, okay, but I'm going to say it however the hell I want to say it when we're in there. So, but I was just saying it to make her kind of quiet, you know. And so to hear you've gone through that process and that you really, like, I can see you're embodying it on a total level. I'm really so happy to hear that. That's great.
Yeah,
well
thank
done.
you. Yeah, thank you.
The other thing I want to say, this is not what Perry would think I'm going to say. There's kind of 2 points, but this is one, and I know, Lou, you'll relate to this.
Yes.
Well, there's those of us in, like you say, we all hide. We all have aspects we hide. We've all been shamed and we all hide things, and there's a lot we could go into around that, and I think it's really important. But I want to speak to the fact that women, all women, have this experience for being women. Women have had to hide being we've had to hide being angry, we've had to hide being smart, all of these things forever. So when we talk about hiding, I can tell you that women have got the nail on that one. Would you agree, Lou?
I do. I agree. And I look back, like when you said that the subject was around hiding, I quickly went into some places, some examples of where I have hidden, and there's just too many to name. And just now that what you're saying in there, Belinda, it just brings a whole lot more back, and bringing this subject of hiding out into the forefront, I think, is probably a first step for a business person as well, especially women, is that when we actually see the pattern of hiding, or what, and I could be wrong here and correct me if it is, it's like the shadow hermit to a certain degree that is kind of hiding away from everything. And when we see where that pattern is playing out in your business, that's where I think a lot of people can start to relate how their business isn't really to that top tier level it really could be. But I think that's a great starting point for absolutely all of us. And you know, I feel like even now I'm coming out of hiding, you know, even though I've had success, and that there's so much that I can sense it around me. And for the part that started for me, I was about 13 years old, and I remember being in my classroom, and that was an age where I was one of those annoying little kids that used to do backyard concerts. And I used to,
you would have
and I would go around and I'd have little 5 cents for a little glass of cordial, and they'd come in and I would mime itsy bitsy teeny weeny bikini. I'd do all of that, and I'd get all these other kids in there doing the same thing. And it was so much fun. It was awesome. So I always had this thing about either being on stage or being in front of people, just making people happy. And so here I am at school, and the mathematics teacher there, and he says, I want every one of you to stand up one at a time and tell me what you're going to be when you grow up. So, of course, we heard the normal. I want to be a teacher. I want to be a nurse, which are amazing things to do, of course, and a fireman, a police, all these wonderful things. Well, I stood up and went, ta-da, I'm going to be a star, like this. Well, I look back, well, the whole room just laughed at me, and I thought, oh, my God, I cannot really be me out here. I cannot just bring that energy to make people happy. And I could see that's where that pattern really started. And that question today is what you're saying, Perry, about hiding, that's what it took me back to. So that's a pattern. And then being able to learn to track that pattern, how it's played out, it's common sense. It's actually logical. It's going to play out in your business.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting that you share how your shadow
Yes.
has ended up being your power.
Yes.
Because that's what you do. And that's real gold, because that's often the case, is, whatever our shadow is. And I think that I think that there's another kind of side to the coin, I think, that's important for people to realize, and that is that some people will be listening to this thinking, nah, I don't really hide anything. And, you even said that, Perry, that, first you're like, I don't hide anything. And people who know me would think I don't hide anything because I'm so full on and I'm so out there. But often they're the hardest people to work with, because if you have a big conscious awareness, like a really big conscious awareness, it's easy to think, well, I don't have anything unconscious, but that's not how it works. The bigger your conscious awareness is, actually the bigger your unconscious awareness becomes as well. So, I was similar to you. I grew up kind of being kind of in front of everything. But I was a little bit different in that when people told me I couldn't do something, I think, you're an idiot. Like, who are you? And, when I had these experiences, and people would think that maybe people thought it was weird, but mostly I was like the weird kid at school that everybody copied and started to dress like me. And I'd be like, that's strange. And I'd have these out there experiences, but I thought it was great, and I thought everybody else was a bit weird that they didn't do it, and that if anybody had a bad thought about what I was doing, I didn't take it on. Really, I didn't as a child. And I remember my dad, I wanted to be a dancer, and I was really, really good. And my dad said to me, what do you want to be, when you get older? And I said, well, I'm going to be a professional dancer. And he said, look, Ben, he called me Ben. He said, being a dancer as a hobby is great, but only 1 in a million people actually can make it professionally as a dancer. And I said, well, but what if I'm that 1 in a million? He said, well, I can't argue with that, can I? And so I became a professional dancer. So that's my psyche. That's how I was. So I spent most of my adult life thinking I don't really hide parts of myself. There's a difference between hiding and discernment too, and I'd love us to talk about that in a moment, because once you do know yourself well, discernment is essential for self-preservation and also to get the outcomes that you want. But of course, I've had parts that I've hidden, and those parts of me were more the vulnerable parts of myself. They were the parts of myself, the more feminine parts of myself that were open to receiving and that were open to feeling really deeply and sharing that vulnerable space with people. And guess what? I've become a relationships expert. So again, that shadow has become my ultimate power, which I think is just so wonderful for us to look. Perry's was his seeing odd things and, having those odd experiences. Yours was, wanting to be a star and having all of those attributes. And my shadow was my vulnerability. And all three of us have turned that into our greatest power and our greatest asset in our businesses.
Well, that's also, by the way, that's perfect Jungian talk, because Jungian talk is the gold in the shadow. And just by the way, also interesting listening to the two of you talk, because I'm just especially when you were talking about what you were talking about, Lou, in your early childhood experience, I'm also looking at cultures. So in America, I spent a lot of time living in America. In America, if you were that little girl,
I'd be so into it.
You'd go, yeah, you're going to be a star. You're going to be a star. Good on you. Yeah, good on you. But here, and part of my shadow making or part of my hiding came from the culture that we grew up in here in Australia, New Zealand, England, you know, where it's just a completely different ethos, where it's tall poppy syndrome. You want to cut people down. You don't. I remember when I was a kid, I remember a day, actually, I came back and I was in town. I was about 16. So people came up and said, we really want you to come and do some modeling for us. And I came home and I said to my parents, I've been offered to do some modeling work, and here's my first job. And I forget what it was back then, but it was something like, you know, probably about 10 times more than my dad earned for the week. And I just remember my family, to this day, it was like, who do you think you are? And I didn't think I was anything. I actually thought I was ugly and horrible. I was just like, but that's part of that thing that we are talking about.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I love what you said there, Belinda, when you talk about, you know, how we use that shadow aspect of it, is because my dad was a music promoter, so I was brought up on around music and the stage. It was very natural for me to be a part of that world. But what happened is I went into industries that meant that I actually help people. I shine the light on other people, and I help them to shine in their life. So that's how I turned that around. But then, you know, going through, like, there was a stage in my life where everything just fell apart at divorce. So I actually had to get up and put myself back out there in a bigger way to get through that. So that was the only thing that then forced me out of that old pattern to say, wait a minute, I really need to do this for myself now. And it was a raging success. But yeah, you can so use that, don't you? Like, it's just that part of life, whether it's a contract you have in life, I don't know, but you use that experience in hopefully positive ways.
I think a really important aspect to share here too is, and something that you can see it's in all of our stories, is that often you hit rock bottom before you find that shadow, because when you're in rock bottom, you're like open to anything, right? And that's when you'll actually go to the places that you may not have gone to before. And I think what's really important with this kind of work that each of us do and that we want to share with people is that you don't actually have to always hit rock bottom. You know, if you're doing this inner work, and I say that I've hit rock bottom since I've been doing this work as well. Maybe not rock bottom, but, you know, I've hit some pretty awful places. So it's not it's not an insurance policy entirely, but certainly when you're doing the inner work, you can avoid hitting those very, very, very rock bottom places, because you're listening, you're hearing, and you're receiving. And so you get the messages and you act on them beforehand. But what the other really important aspect, if you're wanting to cultivate these altered states of consciousness, these higher states of consciousness, one thing is to be able to work with somebody that can help you access them. I mean, that's essential. They're unconscious, so you can't do it by yourself. Myself included. When I want to expand my conscious awareness, I work with somebody to help me see what I can't see. That's number one.
Yeah, you have to.
But the other thing that's really important is creating a framework around you. And I think that's what helped me as a younger person, having a framework that supports what you're doing. So, you know, if you're starting to access these states of consciousness, but every single friend and colleague of yours has got no idea what you're talking about, it doesn't normalize your experience, and it's going to encourage you to keep hiding. So it's important to associate with other people who are at the very least interested in this arena.
Yes. I totally agree. You've got to find some people that are on the same level as you, because it helps normalize it. I want to just ask you both a question, or I want to look at this through another framework for a second. Okay, so I'm throwing this to the two of you. It's so if I start to look at hiding, and I start to look at sort of some other strong belief structures or psychological orientations of hiding, what's happening in hiding is we give the permission to others to decide when we are acceptable or not acceptable. Okay, now, so in this, the power goes away from a self-referring orientation, which is I'm good and right in the world. And by the way, a good question is, what's right about what's wrong with me? Now, I ask myself that question. I've done that before. I've done that for years. What's right with what's wrong with me? Now, what do I mean by that?
That's nice. I like that.
Yeah. These are good questions. There's questions you use in your mind that really open up conscious awareness. That is a perplexing question because it pushes against the part of you that says, well, this is wrong about me because you've inherited that from the world. And you start looking for what's right in that. And that comes back to the goal that you were talking about before, Belinda. But I just want to stay with this for a second. So just that frame, what do you both say about that? And I think females especially, since this is why I'm handing over to you and why I want to ask the question, the framework of I'm going to let the world decide and others decide whether I'm worthy of showing myself, right, and displaying myself. What do you think of that orientation? What's your both your view?
Okay, Belinda.
Sure. Just let me know if you can hear me okay. If you can't, I'm not sure if you can or not.
We can. Your visual goes out.
Okay. Just pretend I look great.
So just a blurry version of great. By the way, you do look healthy. I was saying that before.
Okay, so I wholeheartedly agree with you. By hiding parts of ourselves, we're doing so until, we hide parts until we hear somebody else or something else in the world tell us that that's okay, and that's when we bring it out to the fore. And the problem with that is that we're not only maintaining, but we're cultivating more psychoses, because every single person has a different filter and every single person has a different idea of what's okay and what's not okay. So that's one of the main reasons we live in a crazy state, because we do. Almost all of us do. We're constantly running around in our minds because we're, always looking at our checklist externally to see if this part's okay. Do they say it's okay? Do they say it's okay? The sad thing is, after a while, you actually lose complete touch with those parts of yourself at all to even question if they're okay to bring out. But I think how do we change that then? How do we fix it is, so we have to feel okay with ourselves. And I think that's what you're saying, Perry. And I agree that is part of the process. But I actually think that, and, this is probably a little bit out there for some people, but I don't hide these parts of myself, as Perry will tell you. But ultimately, if you remove every other person from your life and every other influence from your life, just being here in this reality and in this life, we suffer from a sense of being unworthy, not necessarily not deserving, but unworthy, because we are in this life, we're separate, or we experience ourselves as separate from source. And because of that, we never feel quite right. So in my experience, really, when push comes to shove, what we need to do is work on our sense of worthiness, which means work on our realization that we aren't separate from source. And until we get to that level, and even if it just starts as a bit of a concept, but until we get to that level, we're going to keep coming back to questioning, and we're going to keep creating separation. So yeah, it's very much about coming back to a self-referential experience in the world. But even that, our self, our own psyche has been developed via our experience in this world, via what our parents think, via what other people think, via our culture. So we can kind of filter that out to a certain degree, but eventually we have to go to source.
Lou, do you mind if I just have 2 minutes with Belinda on this?
Yes.
Okay. Just 2 minutes. Okay. So you're taking me sideways, Belinda, into and again, I may lose people, but anyway, as I said, I'm here to share everything right now. I'm not playing around. When I was 30, I had 3.5 months in that pure awareness state. Okay, so full transcendence of the ego structure, and there's no separation between me and any other thing. So any of those classical movement from duality into oneness experiences, anything that you would read about, was my living state for 3.5 months. And I've had that stabilized several times in my life. And it's funny, the question that's been arising in me before, by the way, and people, when I talk about questions arising in you, if you've got a question arising in you, it means it's your unconscious or your deeper self prompting you to look at something. That's the start of the reset process. Now, I'm not looking at Belinda right now because I'm looking at the camera, but she knows that as well. When questions start arising in you, you're being guided to look at something. So I think you'll like this, Belinda, because you and I practice transcendent practices. Transcendent practices mean that we are constantly going beyond the normal conventional ego states. So in non-conventional ego states, we have experiences of oneness and transcendence experiences. And so in that, our sense of the world's quite different to other people. But the question that's been arising, because I also think, right, because you've got transcendence, but then you have the living reality in the world, and there's something here to do. And so I think it's a really tricky thing, because it's like Buddha. Buddha went, I'm not going to fully go into the enlightenment process, even though he's enlightened, until everyone else is ready for that. I'm going to start preparing the world for that, because we do live here. Now, I've got, this is just a thing that's arising for me over the next little while, so I haven't formed it in my communication yet. But the question is, how do you transcend and individuate? Because I've realized that in my process, in my reset process, where I've gone from hiding to not hiding, I'm actually individuating away from mass consciousness. Now, I hope that makes sense. So I'm transcending, because I've always got transcendent practices, but those transcendent practices have got me to the point where now I'm individuating more in the world, in the same way that
breaking away, Perry? Like, is that where there's a new level of leadership that's breaking away from that cultural, that's there, that's doing something that's countercultural? And,
correct.
and it's like your time and Belinda and so many that are saying, I'm okay. I don't need to hide in this messy soup that's out here in the world. We see the violence, we see all of that. We need to take a step out for the holism. And that takes a lot of courage. And it's like stepping into a holism, which is good. Like, we're still grounded in who we are, but we're bringing a new consciousness, basically, in a way that so many more people can understand, which is what you're doing in the show, is leading people to that next level. Would that be right?
Yeah, correct. And this is what's really interesting to me. I'm going, isn't this bizarre? So here's transcending, which is something I know well, and Belinda knows well, and I know you have experiences of that. And then at the same time, the drive is to individuate, and to be in purpose. So these two things, right, go together in some weird way.
Yeah,
they do. Can I suggest something here? That individuation process. What Lou was saying. I think this is what Lou was saying, maybe in a different way, and I could be wrong, but that individuation process is not about you stepping out of transcendence. That individuation process is about individuating out of the big mass consciousness or unconsciousness. That individuation process actually takes you closer to transcendence, because as we transcend, we're transcending our ego structure, we're transcending the mass unconsciousness structure, and what we come into then is much more divine guidance. And source is all one, but within source, we are each individual emanations of source here to do other aspects. And there are some completely 100% enlightened masters that grace this earth, truly grace this earth, who can materialize their bodies. Like, I mean, there's actual masters that are of that level. And some of those people, not all of them, but some of them have extremely strong missions. Think about Gandhi. He had a massive mission, but he was definitely transcendent. So that individuation process, I think, is part of what happens when you're transcending.
And especially now, there's that, and that's why where the book, The Reset Revolution, is people are reaching out. This is what I feel, and talking to people are reaching out and saying, how do I reset? So if we don't have that where someone individuates from the mass consciousness, then who do they follow? We have this individuation process has to happen. I just feel otherwise it's just not going to grow. And that's what we have at the moment most definitely. And and it's taking courage, and that's where your reset process, from what I sense, Perry, your reset hit because you're going to guide other people with their whole reset. And it's actually resetting from that unconsciousness that really is running everybody, the human race, into the ground. It's not working and it's not sustainable.
No, the state of the human race is what we're seeing, and we're going to go into this. We're seeing the shadow manifest so strongly. It is incredible. So for those that are watching, the shadow element means, when I say the shadow manifesting, we are seeing all sorts of unconscious behaviors that are not being owned by people in power arising, and also in the general population, where the opposite of it is wisdom. And we're not seeing wisdom. We're seeing almost a reversion. I'm going to hand back over to you two, right? This is a subject that I could speak to for 4 hours. And I've just decided I'm not going to go there.
Too, Perry. We would all listen.
Well, we might do some more. I did plan to do some of that. I actually wanted to do a thing called Uncomfortable Conversations. It's another show I wanted to do.
That's a good. I like that.
Good.
Yeah, uncomfortable conversation. Yeah, and we'd start to look at some of that stuff. But just, I'm going to finish. I'll hand back to you. But it was like I was just watching a very good gentleman this morning. Whose name I forget his name, but basically he was just communicating about what happened before the First World War from Jungian's Red Book, and the shadow, just same thing, made manifest, just absolute insanity. Now, we know through our work, and Belinda knows this, we know this, okay? So what happens on an individual level from a transformational perspective happens on a collective level from a transformational perspective. It's no different, because the collective is just a manifestation of the individuals. So as an example, I'm working with a young Maori boy at the moment. He's a young teenager, 19. And, everyone wants to save him at this point in time. And I'm not that interested in saving, because I know that probably in the next 5 years, he's just going to, he's going to potentially have a whole bunch of train wrecks. He will go to jail. He's going to get beat up. He's beating people up. And so he's controlled by insanity at this point, right? Like, we look at that, and all the middle class people look at him and go, well, how does that work? And I go, I know exactly how that works. And I'm being there for him, trying to work with him, and there's some things that I've got to deal with his family and what have you. But he will probably hit the wall in 5 years. Once he hits the wall, and he's all sorts of people are hurt because of his irrationality, the healing can start, right? We're seeing this made manifest in the world. Sadly, and I don't like saying this, but when the shadow manifests, we're probably seeing an extremely destructive manifestation. At the same time, because it works in polarities, when there's an extremely destructive manifestation, in the wings, the opposite polarity is starting to arise in consciousness. So we're probably seeing some very, very volcanic transformational activity. Wouldn't you agree with that, Belinda? Would you say that's what's going to happen?
Yeah, and I think it's a good reminder here too, just to remind people that, this has already been stated, I think, by both Perry and Lou. The shadow are parts of ourselves that we've hidden away because we're ashamed of them. Yeah. We don't know how to deal with them. And simply that could be things such as anger, because anger is generally not accepted, even power, discernment, because that can be called judgment, a whole bunch of things. So whatever your shadow is, whatever you've hidden away and not attended to. And that then it festers. So what happens is when you hide something away, it doesn't disappear. It continues to gain energy, but it's hidden away. And eventually it will find ways, because the psyche is a self-organizing principle and it has a propensity to move forward. So if you ignore something, it doesn't mean it'll stop there. It'll find cracks. It comes through in perverted ways. And this is when we see the shadow deteriorating or attacking or destroying parts of your life, parts of your business. So what does that look like in everyday life? It looks like you losing it at somebody in a disproportionate way. And even that losing it in that way, like they might have done something a little bit better, you're really losing it. Or it might come out in a way where someone is taking advantage of you, but you don't want to hurt their feelings. So, you've perhaps shamed and therefore created a shadow out of your powerful self or your discerning self. So that's how it manifests in an everyday life, and you end up becoming, you know, not a very effective person. And that's, I think, what you're talking about, Perry, you know, on this global level, this is how it's happening. It happens for people in power, it happens in cultures, it happens in individuals. And ultimately, when it happens in an individual, it's going to affect any part of your life, including your business.
And by the way, Ray,
yeah, sorry. What you're saying, Belinda, is so true. And here we are in lockdown and COVID, and just adding to what you're saying. And I noticed the other day where they said alcohol sales have gone up 40% in lockdown, and basically it's like they're numbing all these things that are trying to come up, and they're trying to keep hidden. Would you agree that that's where alcohol is sometimes used to keep it down?
Oh,
how does alcohol and
alcohol
fighting?
Absolutely, alcohol's a magnifier. I love wine, love it. I tried to like tequila for Perry's sake, but it just didn't happen for me. But I love wine, I love whiskey. I will not touch a drop of alcohol unless I'm in an elevated state. And I like alcohol, don't get me wrong. But if I'm sad or angry or confused or even just neutral, I won't drink. I only ever drink if I'm in an elevated state. And in this COVID situation and the lockdown, it's been such an opportunity for transformation. I've just stopped drinking. I'm very much looking forward to having a glass of wine, I've got to tell you. But it's true, like alcohol is a suppressant. And look, you know, I know somebody who is currently, yesterday, just gone into respite because they're an alcoholic, but this person has PTSD. And they have PTSD because they've worked in this world in a mainstream way, but they are an extremely sensitive person, and that's never been acknowledged. And so they've ended up with PTSD, became an alcoholic because he's self-medicating. So yes, it suppresses, but I also want to just offer that, you know, that passageway to say not to shame ourselves if we are suppressing, because we live in an extremely unhealthy society that doesn't support a healthy living or a healthy lifestyle, which is why finding people and finding networks that can support you coming out of that is really important.
It's actually important. I want to speak to that for a second. I'm going to ask you guys a question, and this is a question that I'm imagining the listeners would like you both to answer. Two things here in regards to that. When people do shadow work, so I just talked to what Belinda said about people suppressing. Look, people haven't been taught in the arts that Belinda and I are fairly masterful at, which is helping a person understand what's going on in their shadow. And when we're helping someone with what's going on in their shadow, we facilitate that with wisdom, in the sense of, we know, right? So you think about what's in a person's shadow is put there because they judge it. They don't like it. Now, it's actually true that some people have gone their whole life not seeing certain aspects of their shadow. So if suddenly they saw that aspect of their shadow, it would crucify them. They would not have the emotional capacity to handle that, which is why when they work with people like Belinda and I, we don't tell them everything that we see straight away. We slowly work them. That's discernment. Now, So just speaking to that for a moment, someone's drinking because that's how you deal with it. Now, and for those of you that do enjoy a drink, I'll just tell you my rule is similar to Belinda's, and I'm not drinking until I have meditated. Okay. Well, that's not true. If there's stress in my system, I'm not going to have a drink until I've meditated, because if I'm fun and happy, it just adds to fun and happiness. It's not suppressing them. That, to me, is the central rule. Question for you both. That's
a really good point, I think. It's a really good guideline, what you've said there, because it does. There's quite a distinction there, and I think that could be really, really helpful to so many people, because sometimes you could be drinking, but you're not really understanding why you're drinking. I think that's a great distinction.
Great. You have to. A little question person could, to make it a really simple tool is like, if you're about to pour a drink, ask yourself, how do I feel? And if you answer, I feel pretty good, great, go for your drink. If you say, I'm feeling a bit stressed, okay, well, I'm going to take 2 minutes, 5 minutes to do a changing of my state process. How do I feel now? I feel good, great, have a drink.
Yeah, simple. That just sets up a whole different orientation with alcohol, which is not based on trying to mask your uncomfortable feelings. Yeah. The question that I have for you both, because Oh my God, you two. What? Yeah, we started here. We've gone off into the universe. We've gone off into global affairs. We're just gone everywhere. We're probably got to, but anyway, in the sense of if someone's hiding and they know they're hiding, first of all, probably even we've got to look at a question, like, because people aren't owning where they're hiding. So how do you help someone own where they're hiding? I'm going to hand this over to you. And what tips and advice would you have for anyone that's hiding? And by the way, I actually want to do another episode on this conversation because I think we can explore this thing from many angles. First one being, this is just from an energetic perspective, if you're hiding, you're not shining. I want to say that. If you're hiding, you're not shining. Now, if you're not shining, that also means you're not in purpose. And it also means that you're not in mission. And I think that's just an important thing to say to close up, which is probably why I want to come back and keep working with the subject for a little bit. But what would you advise anyone listening or watching this in regards to identifying where they hide, maybe some things they can start to think about?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I personally relate to, it's that little whisper, that's that little niggle that's, you're going about your normal life, but there's that part of you that there's a sense of something's missing, or things that you would like to do, but you're not really doing. Look at the things that you're putting off. And that's what I found for me. I was the world's best at putting things off. I'll do that when I'm perfect. I'll do that because to go and do that would mean that I would have, I don't want the rejection, or I didn't want to look bad or be laughed at. It's that same thing. So just for me, I'd just like to share the one tip from me is to really trust that voice that is trying to guide you into your true gifts. Because when we hide, the saddest part about when we hide, and I felt this personally, is that we hide our gifts from other people, and we were born with those gifts, and people are there ready to receive your gifts, and we don't have to allow all the other the shadow that's in there telling us we're not good enough. Just know that you're good enough exactly the way you are to take the first step and start learning, and see these amazing, incredible coaches like you guys and everything you offer. Like, that's the thing. Get conscious about where you're going in your life and take a step. That's my little bit there. Yeah.
Love it. So great, Lou. It's so beautiful. And, I love listening to you say that, because that's not what I was going to say. And it was so nice to hear you say that and go, oh, of course, that is, that's a really big part of it. For me, I would say wherever something doesn't feel good, if there's anything in your life that doesn't feel good, like I don't like, you've yelled at someone, doesn't feel good, I'm not getting where I want to go there, or I'm not getting along with that person, or I don't want to call my mother, whatever it is, that just doesn't feel good, it's likely there's a shadow there that you're not owning. And that's the first place to look, I would say. When something doesn't feel good, it's not working, take a moment to inquire deeply as to what is going on for me, how do I feel? And also a little reminder that shadows aren't something that you want to get rid of. A shadow is something that you want to listen to. And Lou talked about listening to that voice. Now, I would hazard a guess that a lot of people out there don't get that voice yet. And that would be because you're in denial of the shadow. But once you actually go, oh, that's where the shadow is, and Lou probably does this naturally already, is that she's like, oh, something doesn't feel right. So she'll turn around and she'll listen to it. And so she's listening to the shadow and she's getting the guidance and following the voice. So for those who don't yet have a voice, where does it feel clunky? And look to that and start to listen.
She's been trained by me. So she's trained. She's like, she does the work.
Yeah,
does
there
the
you
work.
go. And that's look, even for myself, the other day I was doing some very, very big, deep transformational work, very big, and I was getting some guidance. And in the end, I said something like, well, how am I going to, I was asking the question, how am I going to be able to continue on the path when I don't have these signals anymore that I don't want to have anymore? And I just got like, I started to like literally cry laughing, just crying laughing, because I was getting very, very loudly, just effing listen.
Yeah.
So in the end, it is what that's the most important key that you want to develop if you don't have it yet, is how to listen. And that's what, that's what Perry helps you to do, right? Is helps you how to listen. Yeah.
So I really loved working with you both today, and Belinda, it's good to see your lion energy again. You got lioness energy. Jeez.
Well, we're leopard today, I think, aren't we? The two of us.
Yeah,
we are. We're leopard today.
yeah, well done. Look at the pride you guys put into how you dress. I'm constantly being told, Perry, don't go on like that. But anyway, really appreciate it. And look,
I feel like I'm in between two geniuses. Like, seriously.
Well, you know what I'm going to do? I can't help myself. I'm going to. Let's bring her into Reset Revolution too. I'm not
hiding, you see. I'm just out here.
Yeah, no, that's right. I might get her to help me with some stuff in the Reset Revolution.
Yeah.
Always happy to work with you, Perry. And it's been so nice to work with you. And I want to read your book now.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
How do people find you, Belinda?
It's up on Amazon now through Kindle. We're just waiting for the hardcover to be approved.
I'm a hardcover girl. I'm going to wait for the paper.
Yeah, it's there. It's called Your Reset Revolution, and it's lovely. It's a beautiful, beautiful book just to, really connect to the importance of resetting, especially right now. It's a marvelous book.
Right, I'm going to get it.
Thank you.
Belinda, how do people find you?
People can find me on my website, belindabailey.com, or Facebook, or Instagram, all the usual places. So if you want to see the work that I do, mostly I work with groups. I do a little bit of individual work, but just check me out on one of those places.
Beautiful. I will. I'll check all that out. I know I'd like to, let people know all about you, Belinda.
Thank you.
I'm going to bring in some more of the things we do. I think we've got to get her on a few of our podcasts soon.
I agree.
Yeah.
Sounds fun.
All right. See you guys.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.